Good morning, and welcome to the second edition of the State of Asia conference here in the gorgeous Swiss Re Center for Global Dialogue. Today, we want to discuss the state of Asia, as the name of the conference suggests. Yes, all of it, all of Asia. And I think it's fair to ask, well, is that even possible? It's a pretty big place, and we only have one day. Asia, in fact, is a vast place. It is home to 49 countries and almost 60% of the world's population. It spans 11 time zones, and over 2,300 languages are spoken across the region. Asia is also a rapidly changing place. It hosts several fast-growing economies, many of the countries are urbanizing quickly, and of course, the clout and influence of Asia on the world stage is growing continuously. And perhaps most importantly, and you've heard me say this many times before, Asia is not a clearly defined place. In fact, the slides last year when you walked into this conference had the phrase, "Where is Asia?" ? And it's still a question that we're asking. Where does Asia start? Where does it end? Is there even something like Asian culture, Asian history, Asian food? Contrary to the Americas and Africa, Asia's geographic borders are not clearly drawn. And contrary to Europe, there is no political institution covering the region. Instead, it is marked by vast differences in economic potential, political system, religion, and history. Even the name Asia is not Asian. It's European in origin, evidenced by the fact that the word for the region in most Asian languages is just a transliteration of the word Asia. So Asia very much is a concept that is in our heads. It is too big, too vast, too rapidly changing, too fuzzily defined to be comprehended. And if our goal is to understand Asia, well, then we are simply setting ourselves up for failure. So what are we doing here? Why are we even here? Well, just because we cannot understand Asia does not mean we don't have to think about it. And just because there is no clear and immediate definition of the term Asia does not mean it's not worth using the term. The key here is to focus not on understanding Asia, which I think is something that is impossible to do, but on building Asia Competence, which of course is the mission of Asia Society Switzerland. That means focusing on concepts, on mental models, on frameworks and connections instead of just the facts. Developing Asia Competence does not mean becoming an Asia expert. You don't need to be an Asia expert, and today will not make you one unless you already are one. And there are few. What today will do is it will provide you with an overview of what we think are the most important developments in the region. We will share ideas, we will share concepts that enable you to think better, to think more strategically about Asia. But then you might ask, well, why do you even have to care about that in the first place? Especially in Switzerland, I think it's easy to believe that in most cases, we are shielded from geopolitics. We are shielded from what's going on in the wider world. But, and I'm quoting here our last year's keynote speaker, Raja Mohan, reflected on the opening slide as he walked in this morning, Europe and Switzerland particularly need to acknowledge that the party is over. What Raja meant by this, he said this a few weeks ago in a podcast that we recorded with him, is that geopolitics now matters to all of us. What he said is that, where Europe once believed that it was a nice and beautiful garden, it now has to acknowledge the return of the jungle. So I know that I'm saying this, but of course you already know. You already are interested, or else you wouldn't be here today. But then again, as I was preparing for today, I asked myself this question. Does it really impact our day-to-day work and life who wins the presidential elections in Taiwan, which is something we're going to be talking about later today, or what India does and does not do at the G20 summit? Even the meeting between Presidents Biden and Xi last week, which is widely covered, in which I'm sure you all spent considerable time thinking about and reading about, is unlikely to affect us immediately and directly. The current war in the Middle East is another example. It's highly tragic and highly disruptive to the region, but so far we also have to acknowledge that it has had a limited effect on global markets and economies. It has not led to a wider crisis in the region. So I think the key point here is that even if these events do not have an immediate impact on you, on your business, on your organization, what they are is they are signals of an impending change. They're pieces of a puzzle, but one where the big picture isn't clear yet, and one where the big picture also is possibly changing. And so the only way to see this emerging picture is to keep watching the pieces of the puzzle. What you need to do is to adapt a wide-angle lens on the world. So some of those puzzle pieces may end up being irrelevant. Some may even be wrong or misleading. But following them, at least to an extent, developing what we sometimes call ambient awareness, is the only way to hopefully catch a glimpse of the emerging picture. So of course, providing you with this wide-angle lens, with this ambient awareness for the key developments in Asia, is our goal for today. In the 2 morning blocks of today's conference, we will look at the current state of Asia, at the idea of multi-alignment, or dynamic multipolarity, as Bilahari mentioned yesterday, at the state of the economy, and much more. Then after lunch in the first block, we will start to look towards the future, at the range of elections that will impact Asia next year, but also at the key risks that Asia faces in the years to come. And finally, in the last block of the conference, we will ask what all these developments mean for us here in Switzerland and in Europe. Throughout the day, we welcome your questions, which you can submit at any point through Slido. You can scan the QR code behind me or go to slido.com and enter the code State of Asia to submit your questions. And by the way, if you need the Wi-Fi, there's a free Wi-Fi called Swiss Re. You'll need to enter your phone number to get access. I assume most of you have access anyway, but just in case. Whenever possible, we will try to include your questions in the sessions itself. But because we have quite a high pace, we have many sessions, they tend to be relatively short, we've also set aside time today twice, once before lunch and then once at the very end of the conference, to address a range of questions with all speakers that are present in one go. This means that you can submit almost any question to almost any speaker at almost any time today, and we will hopefully eventually get around to answering it in those sessions. We will also use Slido a few times today to run some polls. And since our first session this morning is going to be focused on the state of the world, I thought we could just try that and get you acquainted with the tool by starting a poll asking you how you would describe the state of the world. Do you think we are living through a new Cold War? Or do you think this is the era of multi-alignment, with countries forging ties with many others without forming distinct blocs? Are we moving to what Ian Bremmer once called the G0 world, where there is an international power vacuum leading to a lack of coordinated action on any number of global issues? Or, last option, are we seeing, as Raja Mohan proclaimed, the return of the jungle, where the only rule is survival of the fittest? And yes, we're aware there are other options, those are just the 4 that we thought would be fun to do. So what you can do, if you haven't done yet, is you can scan the Slido code and submit your vote. And while you do that, let me just talk to you a little bit more about today's program. As last year, I'm thrilled to have Bruno Messaisch with us, a prolific analyst and commentator. At several points throughout the day, I will ask Bruno on stage to offer his real-time commentary analysis of what's been said, how it relates to other sessions, and what open questions still remain. Many of you will also be aware of Asia Society Switzerland's Gen A Young Leadership Program, which offers a 1-year training on Asia Competence to 25 selected young fellows from Switzerland. I'm delighted that once again, the entire current class and quite a few alumni are joining us today. They're an incredibly diverse and accomplished group, and I encourage you to chat with them about their experience and their insights during the break. You can recognize them because it says Gen A on their badges. And I also think they have Gen A tote bags with them, so they're very well branded. We will also feature 3 Gen A fellows on stage throughout the day for a short 8-minute presentation on a topic dear to their hearts. Before we kick off, let me also add a few words of thanks to Swiss Re, who are so graciously hosting us here in their beautiful center, and who have been a key partner of Asia Society Switzerland from day one. And also to the University of Zurich, who hosted last evening's State of Asia address with Bilahari Kausikan, which of course many of you attended, as you can see in this beautiful picture from last night. One last thing. Everybody who's up on stage here today, notable exception of myself, has an impressive and very long CV. But I don't want to take time away from the discussion by reading those CVs to you. So I'm not going to do that. I'll be very brief in my introduction. You all should have gotten a booklet with a program and all the speaker bios in it, and I would refer you to that if you want to know more about the speakers, or of course you can just go and talk to them during the break. So because yesterday evening we discussed the state of Asia, we wanted to kick off this morning by applying an even wider angle lens and talk about the state of the world. And we've allocated exactly 20 minutes to this very specific question. So we hope that we can cover all of it during that time. First, let's quickly look how you think the state of the world should best be described by seeing the results of the poll. Okay, there seems to be a very clear winner with the era of multi-alignment, but I'm thrilled to see that 23% of you believe that we are living in the jungle. I'd love to talk to you in the break afterwards, and then we see that the Cold War and G0 world only have a few votes each, and I think that sets us up very well for this initial conversation that we're going to be having here up on stage.